Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm your ever-loving host, Shorty. And today I'm going to be reviewing another vampire story. This one's Mortal Terror, and I've reviewed vampire stories in the past. I've given some pretty good ones. I think one of my favourites is still going to be Rab V's, where he takes the idea of vampires and just aristocracy and inherited wealth and makes them into imperialists. Yay! It works quite nicely. I've even liked the one where it basically does people being turned into vampires as an emergent middle class. I like the fact that you can play around with the vampire mythos. This one certainly does that and tries to do it in a slightly more extreme but also more safe way. Before I get too far into it, it is worth talking about the artwork first. It is really, really good. I have so little criticism for it, but it also, again, feels like it is playing a little bit safe. This is a comic book story set very much within the world of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And Dark Horse have done a Bram Stoker's Dracula story, and they've involved Mike Mignola, who's done a variant cover for this comic book, and the artwork feels very much exactly what I'd expect it to. It looks great. I mean, there's a lack of detail, which I quite like. It means it's not too busy on the page. There isn't, much in the way of big OTT action sequences. There's one where I think I had to struggle to keep track of exactly who everyone was and who they were fighting, but that, I think, with an extra read, that might have cleared it all up. I do like the colouring. There's some really nice rich depth to it. It does do some Victorian sepia tones, but also some really nice flame effects. So it's kind of cool. I like it. It's the story, though, which is more frustrating, because it is 100% set within the world of Bram Stoker's Dracula. As I've said, we have characters from that story. And I have read the story and watched the movie and read the comic book based on the movie, based on the book. I know very well who these characters are, and what's really nice to see is the creator of this comic book has actually kept character traits really well done. This is Christopher Golden and Tim LeBon, by the way. All the characters come across kind of how I'd want them to. There's no huge changes, other than the fact that they are vampires now, and as such there are some heightened parts of their personality. Because that is the big change here, and it's one which I think is an interesting idea, which is if you just kind of reverse the population density of vampires and humans, the vast majority of people being vampires, and humans being just a few survivors. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting enough concept. And the humans, apparently if they bite, vampires can turn them back into humans, but the vampires don't remember being humans because there's some kind of weird thing that happens when you get turned into a vampire where it messes with your memory. And at this point I started getting a bit weirded out by the story, because add to that the fact that in the comic book, when people are referred to as mortals, that seems to be a word that people are scared of and they don't want to believe these people exist. I'm like, wait, hang on, who do vampires feed off? Because vampires, specifically the vampires of Bram Stoker's story, do need blood to survive. They are practically immortal. Go out in the sunshine, stick to the heart, they still can die. Which is interesting, because I like the idea that people who are ostensibly immortal would fear death more. I like that. That's a vibe we get from them, which is really nicely done. But at no point during the comic book, textually at all, does it say why a vampire bitten by a human would turn into a human. And at no point textually in the story does it say how they feed. There's a little bit in the back matter where it does say that vampires have human farms where they are just cattle, and I'm like, oh, okay, so maybe their idea of mortal doesn't cover that. That's more livestock, and an actual mortal is a dangerous thing that's out there. But these changes frustrated me a little bit, simply because when it comes down to it, I don't like the idea of having too much information put in front of me when I'm reading a comic book. I don't like data dumps. But I do want to know why these differences are there from the source material. I'm not saying it needs to be 100% accurate to it. I'm not saying there is any need for internal consistency between two different stories like this. But the fact that they are so close together, involving the same characters in the same time period, in the same location, it does feel like if you change something that big and not tell us why, it's a bit frustrating. I actually think if you're going to tell this kind of story and have these things happen to vampires in this way, the worst thing you can do is make it so overtly inspired by Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't mind the fact that it could be set in the same world. I like the idea of reading 3 issues and then finding out that's oh my god, isn't that Jonathan Harker? That would be a cool little reveal. It's oh, it's just a strange, different, reverse version of that world. The fact that we start knowing this, straight away, but do not have these kind of fundamental questions of mythology answered, is frustrating, because I don't want them answered in the first issue. I don't want all the information dropped in on me, but I expect to know why it's so different to what I'm expecting. Basically what I'm saying is I have questions about how the world works, and what I want is less information. I like the idea of discovering it naturally through story, but if I already go in with expectations, it messes that up a little bit. It's a frustrating one. I like a lot of what it's doing, but I struggle to recommend it because maybe other people might think the same way as I do. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll just enjoy it for what it is, and I'm a weirdo. Who knows? But that's it for me for now. There might still be one more review. I've still got 2 more things to read this week. I might get around to them. I think I've got Hilicious, which is getting relaunched, or has been relaunched, and the new Batman with Doug Mank on the artwork. So who knows? You might get a bonus weekend review. Until then, though, or maybe until next week, look after each other, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.